At 17, my father humiliated me at his birthday gala and accused me of stealing $7,000 in front of 200 guests. He disowned me and kicked me out. Months later, my evidence exposed the truth and left my family's empire in ruins. Hey, Reddit. My family tried to ruin my life to protect their golden child. So I exposed the lies, took control of my future, and left them behind. But they weren't finished with me yet. Before we get there, let me start from the beginning. My name is Barbara W. Brown. I'm 17, the oldest daughter of Thomas and Veronica Walker, and the one the family never brags about. My father runs Walker Dynamics, a defense tech company that thrives on contracts and cocktail parties. My mother treats our lives like a stage production, every appearance rehearsed and polished. My sister Angela, 15, is the star of their show. Perfect grades, endless charm, the golden child. And me, I'm the quiet one who builds code instead of conversations. The kid they try to hide when cameras show up. Tonight was my father's 50th birthday, and they'd turned it into a spectacle. The country club ballroom in Northrest looked like a presidential fundraiser. Chandeliers blazing, champagne flowing, a jazz band playing too softly under the drone of expensive conversations. There were 200 people here, politicians, investors, clients, journalists. The family was on display, and Thomas Walker was loving every second of it. I sat near the back, half listening, dressed in a suit that didn't quite fit. Angela was at the center of it all, weaving through the crowd like a seasoned politician. She'd already given a speech about how much she'd learned from Dad's work ethic, earning polite applause. My mother hovered nearby, praising the decor she'd personally designed. I kept my head down, scrolling through a robotics article on my phone and trying to stay invisible. Then, just after the main course, my father tapped a glass for silence. The room hushed instantly. "Before we cut the cake," he said, voice booming through the mic, "I want to address something important, something disappointing." My stomach tightened. The tone was wrong. Too cold, too deliberate. He gestured toward me. "Barbara, come up here." Every head turned. I froze, then stood, walking toward the stage under 100 curious eyes. My mother was waiting near the podium, a folder clutched to her chest like a legal exhibit. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I wish we didn't have to do this tonight, but integrity is a Walker value, and sometimes integrity means confronting hard truths." Angela stepped closer, face already crumpling. "I didn't want to say anything," she whispered into the microphone, "but I can't keep lying for her." My father's arm clamped down on my shoulder. "Our daughter," he said, his voice heavy with practiced disappointment, "stole from her own mother." The room rippled with gasps. Veronica opened the folder and produced a stack of receipts. $7,000 in unauthorized purchases, she announced. "High-end electronics, sneakers, all charged to my card." "That's not," I started, but Angela cut me off. "I saw her sneaking the card from Mom's wallet," she said, tears streaking perfectly applied makeup. I begged her to stop. Lies, all of it. But the performance was flawless. Security appeared beside me. My father nodded. "Check her jacket." They told me I could leave or consent to a search under club policy. I said yes. What else was I supposed to do? Then, with theatrical precision, one of them reached into my inside pocket and pulled out a credit card and 2 printed receipts. I hadn't worn this suit in weeks. My pulse roared in my ears. The night before, Mom helped pick my suit, the first time she'd cared what I wore in years. So, of course, the receipts were already in the inside pocket. The crowd buzzed. Phones rose, recording. Angela buried her face in Mom's shoulder. My father stared at me like I was a stranger. "You disgrace this family," he said. "You abuse our name. You're finished, Barbara." "Dad," my voice cracked, useless against the wall of staged betrayal. He stepped forward, towering over me. "From this moment, you are cut off. No allowance, no college fund, no place in this house. You are not a Walker." Some guests whispered, others shook their heads. A few raised their phones higher. Security led me toward the exit. As the doors closed behind me, I heard the band start playing again, as if nothing had happened. Outside, rain hammered the parking lot. My phone buzzed with notifications, messages, screenshots already circulating, photos of me being escorted out. Within an hour, the scholarship committee I'd spent years impressing emailed, application status under review. I stood alone on the curb, soaked and shaking. My family was inside, laughing with senators and CEOs, and I was the thief they'd cast out to protect their illusion. A black sedan pulled up. Miles leaned out the driver's side. "Get in." I slid into the passenger seat, drenched and silent. He didn't ask what happened. He'd already seen the videos. Everyone had. "You're staying at my place," he said. No arguments. Back at Miles's apartment, I dropped my soaked jacket on the floor and sat on his couch. No family, no home, no future plan. Just the knowledge that the people who were supposed to protect me had turned me into a villain to save themselves. But sitting there in the dark, a different thought took hold, sharper, clearer. They wanted me gone. They wanted me powerless. They wanted the world to believe I was nothing without them. I stared out at the rain streaking the window and made myself a promise. They were going to regret underestimating me. I'd been sleeping on Miles's couch for 3 weeks by the time the shock wore off. The first few nights I barely slept at all. But life doesn't stop because you've been humiliated. Rent still exists. College application deadlines still pass. So I worked. Miles's uncle owned a repair shop wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop on the edge of town. He got me a night job there, cleaning motherboards, swapping cracked phone screens, and resoldering laptop ports for minimum wage. The gossip followed me everywhere. Veronica, my mother, had told anyone who asked that I was in a rehab facility after falling in with the wrong crowd. It was easier for her to lie than admit they'd thrown me out. At school, teachers stopped calling on me. People I'd known for years crossed the hallway to avoid me. My robotics teammates, who I thought were friends, removed me from the group chat. Angela posted Instagram stories with captions like, "Some wounds come from those closest to us," and hashtags like, #betrayed by blood. Her followers flooded the comments with sympathy. The anger that had felt so heavy at first started to harden into something sharper. If they were going to ruin my name, I would build a case so strong it would crush theirs. I started by digging through every detail I could remember about the night the purchases happened. The transactions were dated on a Tuesday. I had robotics practice until late. I wasn't even home. That alone didn't prove anything, but it was a start. Next, I logged into the home router. They hadn't changed the admin password. I'd set it up 2 years earlier when I built a home lab, a cheap NAS with centralized logging. I'd configured the VPN and logging under my own accounts while I still lived there. I never accessed content I didn't own, only device metadata and the cloud archives tied to my subscriptions. The router, doorbell, and printer shipped syslogs to the NAS. After I was kicked out, I reached the NAS through my VPN's remote admin tunnel and pulled the timestamped device events. The access logs listed every device that had connected in the past 6 months. I correlated the router's DHCP lease logs. Device, Angela MBP, online 6:20 to 7:15 p.m., with merchant email timestamps. Later, subpoenaed browser sync logs from her school account confirmed the times. All 3 clocks lined up to the minute. Then I checked the doorbell camera account. That, too, was still tied to my email. Another oversight. The cloud archive showed clear video of Angela signing for 2 delivery packages on a Friday afternoon, while I was logged into the robotics lab computers across town. The doorbell cloud archive was in my name, and I still had the 2-factor authentication backup codes from setup, so the access was lawful. Finally, my NAS had captured AirPrint job metadata in syslog, file name, user, and timestamp from Mom's HP printer. The entry showed a job titled Order Receipt PEF from Angela's user the night before the dinner. Weeks later, detectives pulled the printer's onboard job log and our HP Smart account metadata, which matched my cached syslog down to the minute. I'd set up the whole stack under my own accounts. The router, the NAS, and the doorbell subscription were all registered to me with my email as the owner and billing contact. I didn't publish or leak anything. I exported the logs and hashes, then had counsel review what I could use. For anything beyond my ownership, I treated my local metadata as leads and planned to corroborate it properly. Piece by piece, the picture became undeniable. The theft, the planting of evidence, the performance, all of it was orchestrated by Angela. They'd been so focused on destroying me, they'd forgotten how much of the house's infrastructure I'd built myself. I organized everything into folders on a flash drive: router logs, camera footage, screenshots, timestamps. I wasn't ready to use it yet, but I would be. And when I did, I wouldn't just clear my name. I'd tear down the image they'd built around themselves. One Thursday night, as I was closing up the shop, a black Mercedes pulled up outside. Julian Reed stepped out. Tailored suit, expensive watch, and a look that said he didn't do surprise visits. He waited by the door until I opened it. "Mind if we talk?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. Julian was my father's business partner, the man who'd whispered at the party that they should cut the dead weight. I doubted he was here for small talk. "I'll make this simple," he said, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "Thomas is willing to make this all go away. A settlement, cash, discreet." I didn't touch the folder. "What's the catch?" "You sign this," he said, sliding a document across the counter. A legal waiver co-signed by a guardian relinquishing any claim to the Walker estate now or in the future. "Once you do that, we pay you a generous sum and move forward. No more drama. Everyone wins." I scanned the paper. The offer was real, more money than I'd ever seen, but the message underneath was clear. They were scared of what I might do. This was an attempt to buy silence. Even if I signed without a guardian, it wouldn't hold. He was counting on pressure, not enforceability. I pushed the document back toward him. "Tell my father I'm not for sale." Julian studied me for a long moment, his smile tightening. "You're making a mistake, Barbara. This doesn't end the way you think it does." "It ends exactly the way I think it does," I said. "Just not for you." He left without another word. For the first time since that night at the country club, I felt something close to control. I had the truth. I had the proof. And soon I'd have the one thing they couldn't buy back: their reputation. By late fall, my scattered pieces of evidence had evolved into a weapon. The flash drive I'd been building was no longer just proof. It was an airtight case. Every file had a place. Screenshots of online orders, router logs with timestamps, doorbell footage of deliveries, fake receipts printed from Angela's account. Everything lined up into a timeline that told a story far stronger than any words I could say. But I knew that evidence alone wasn't enough. My parents didn't care about facts. They cared about appearances, and to destroy appearances, I needed a stage. That's when Miles brought David Nam into the picture. He introduced him one afternoon after school, dropping his backpack by the couch. "Barbara, this is David. Journalism student, runs an investigative podcast called Deep Dive. He might be able to help." David shook my hand with a firm grip and an assessing look. We'd crossed paths before on campus events, and there had been a quiet pull between us. Seeing him now, that pull became a certainty. "Miles says you're sitting on a scandal. That true?" "It's not a scandal," I said, handing him a copy of the evidence. "It's a setup. My sister staged a theft, planted evidence, and my parents ran with it." He scrolled through the folders, pausing over router logs and video stills. "This is serious, and it's airtight. But evidence is just part of the battle. People don't rally behind data, they rally behind stories." I frowned. "So, what's the story?" He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Walker Dynamics is bidding on a government defense contract. Their pitch is all about trust, legacy, family integrity. If the public finds out the CEO's family framed his own daughter to protect optics, that contract dies before the ink dries." I hadn't known about the contract. David's angle was better than anything I'd planned. "So we expose them?" I asked. "Not all at once," he said. "Phase 1, we drop the truth locally, enough to dent the image. Phase 2, we tie that truth directly to the company. Once investors and partners get nervous, the whole operation collapses." The plan was bold, but it made sense. We spent hours tightening it. David would host the story on Deep Dive, using documents and testimony to build a narrative. Miles would corroborate details, including the night he saw Angela with the packages. I'd stay behind the scenes preparing technical verification and backups. Somewhere between scaffolding the outline and debating cut points, David brushed my hand when we reached for the same printout. The look we shared said what neither of us needed to narrate out loud. This wasn't just strategy anymore. All we needed was one last piece: A real, undeniable admission from Angela herself. We didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, the biggest event of the semester rolled around. A homecoming after-party at a classmate's lake house. It was the type of gathering Angela lived for. Influencers, student council stars, children of donors. I wasn't invited, but Miles was, and that was all we needed. "She'll show off," he said before heading out. "She always does, and she can't resist bragging when she's the center of attention." Hours later, a notification pinged on my phone, a live audio feed from the tiny recorder hidden in Miles's jacket. Our state is one-party consent, and Miles was part of the conversation, so the recording was lawful. Music and chatter filled the background, but Angela's voice cut through, sharp and confident. "Of course I framed her," she was saying. "Dad never questions me. I just printed a fake receipt and cried a little. They believed every word." Someone asked if she was worried I might fight back. "Fight back?" she scoffed. "She's broke. She's out of the house, and nobody cares what she says. She's nothing." Every word tightened the knot in my chest. She wasn't confessing by accident. She was proud of it. Proud of ruining my life because she knew she could. The most unexpected twist came when Mrs. Everett, one of Veronica's closest friends and a pillar of their social circle, stepped into the conversation. Her voice was low but firm. "Angela, do you realize how serious what you're saying is?" Angela shrugged. "What's serious? They believed me. They always will." That was the moment the tide shifted. Mrs. Everett didn't keep it to herself. By the next morning, the story of Angela's casual confession was circulating through the neighborhood's high society. By Monday, 2 family offices withdrew from co-investment agreements with Walker Dynamics. The cracks were spreading. I met David that afternoon at a small cafe near campus. He had my dossier spread across the table and a focused calm that steadied my nerves. "We're ready," he said, his voice softening as his hand found mine beneath the table. "The first episode drops next week. Once it does, there's no going back. Are you sure?" "They'll try to bury it," I said. "They'll try," he agreed. "But the facts are too strong. And once this is public, they'll be playing defense, not offense." Outside, snow feathered the sidewalks, the city cold and gray. For months, they dictated the story. I was the thief, the failure, the disgrace. They had built their empire on control and manipulation. I was going to tear it apart with the truth. The week deep dive dropped, the temperature in Northwest shifted. The first episode, The Walker Lie, went live on Tuesday, October 28th. David opened with a simple question. What happens when the people meant to protect you decide to destroy you instead? From there, he laid everything out. The credit card purchases, the planted evidence, Angela's bragging at the party, the timestamps proving I wasn't even home. Every claim was backed by documentation, screenshots, and verifiable digital trails. He even had a forensics consultant verify file hashes and timestamps before airing. By noon, the episode had over 50,000 streams. By sunset, it was trending locally. And by the next morning, Walker Dynamics' PR department was on fire. Local news anchors replayed the podcast excerpts, debating the story on live TV. My parents, who had spent decades building their reputation, were now defined by a single headline: CEO's family-framed own daughter. The first person to break silence was Veronica. She posted a carefully worded statement on social media claiming the story was fiction and an attempt by a disgruntled ex-family member to seek attention. It was exactly what David predicted they'd do: dismiss the evidence, question my credibility, double down on the lie. I was ready for that. On Monday, November 3rd, I filed a police report and, on a separate civil track, sent a certified letter to my parents. It outlined 4 demands. "This isn't a bargain to avoid charges," I wrote. "The criminal report proceeds regardless. The civil terms are about repairing the harm you caused. A notarized confession from Angela, full restoration of my college fund, plus financial compensation for damages. A public apology for the false accusations. Angela's resignation from all leadership positions and extracurricular boards." They had 5 business days to comply. Deadline, Friday, November 7th, 5:00 p.m. Their response was silence. By Friday, November 7th, I walked out of the repair shop after a late shift and found Thomas waiting by the curb. He was leaning against his black SUV, suit still perfect, expression carved from stone. "You think this is going to work?" he asked as I approached. "You think you can humiliate us and walk away?" I stopped a few feet short of him. "I'm not humiliating anyone. I'm telling the truth." "This stunt of yours could cost hundreds of people their jobs," he snapped. "Contracts, deals, livelihoods, all because you're throwing a tantrum." I met his glare without blinking. "All of this is happening because you lied. You and Mom made a choice. You didn't just throw me out. You destroyed my name. Actions have consequences." His jaw tightened. "Take the podcast down." "No. Then I'll make sure you regret it." He pushed off the SUV and stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're still my daughter. I can make this go away. A public statement, a donation in your name, maybe even reinstate the trust fund. But you stop this now." "I don't want your money," I said. "And I don't want your approval. I want accountability. If that's too much for you, then we're done here." For the first time, I saw something crack in his expression. Not regret, but fear. Then he turned and got into the SUV without another word. David wasn't done. He released a second podcast episode. This one focused on how Walker Dynamics' brand was built on family values while their CEO disowned his own daughter on false charges. He connected the scandal to company filings, PR campaigns, and investor reports. It was a surgical takedown, and it hit harder than either of us expected. Within 48 hours, advisors marked down internal estimates by approximately 12%, and lenders signaled tighter covenants. A pending term sheet was put on hold. Several local nonprofits publicly distanced themselves from Veronica's charity foundation. Angela's school suspended her from all leadership positions pending investigation. Even Julian Reed, who had once called me a mistake, was now leaking anonymous quotes to reporters about mismanagement and lack of oversight. The walls around them were closing in. I spent those days working my shifts, answering emails from journalists, and watching the story spread. There was no dramatic moment of triumph, no cinematic takedown, just a steady, relentless erosion of everything they valued: reputation, wealth, control. One night, Miles and I watched a live news segment showing Walker Dynamics headquarters with a growing crowd of reporters outside. "You realize they're panicking, right?" Miles said. "They've lost control of the story." "That's the point," I said. "For once, they don't get to decide the narrative." By the end of the week, I knew we'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. The Walkers could no longer dismiss me as a disgruntled teenager. I was a legal threat, a PR crisis, and a walking liability. And they were about to learn what it felt like to be powerless in a story they could no longer control. The next step wasn't mine, it was theirs, and whatever choice they made next would determine how much more they had left to lose. The pressure on the Walkers exploded in a single week. The board of Walker Dynamics called an emergency meeting after 2 investors froze funding, and a government procurement office opened a responsibility determination and ethics review. Thomas's empire, built over decades, was bleeding money and credibility by the hour. Behind the polished facade, panic was spreading. That's when Veronica called. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Barbara, we need to talk. Please come home just for a meeting. We'll listen." I agreed, but only on my terms. "The conversation is recorded. A lawyer will be present. If either of you walks out, it's over." She hesitated, then said yes. 2 days later, I stood in the foyer of the house I'd been thrown out of. Everything looked the same: the white marble floors, the curated art, the smell of expensive furniture polish. But the energy was different. Thomas's posture was tight. Veronica's eyes were red from crying. Angela sat on the couch, arms crossed, chewing her nails. They were a family under siege, and they knew it. "Thank you for coming," Thomas said stiffly. I set my laptop on the dining table. "This isn't a conversation. This is a presentation. And when it's done, you'll understand why you're here." My attorney, Mr. Kim, set a recorder on the table and nodded for me to begin. I connected the laptop to the big screen and opened my timeline. It began with a chart of every online purchase: date, time, shipping address, all traced to Angela's laptop. Next came the router logs, showing her device logging into shopping sites during hours I was at school. Then the doorbell footage, high-definition video of Angela signing for 2 packages while I was logged into the robotics lab's network miles away. Then the cloud print history, a fake receipt created from her user profile and printed the night before the birthday dinner. Each slide landed like a hammer. Angela shifted uncomfortably. Veronica covered her mouth. Thomas stared at the screen, jaw locked. I clicked play on the next file. Audio from the lake house party. Angela's voice filled the room, confident, arrogant, bragging about planting the card and printing fake evidence. They believed every word, she said. She's nothing. When the recording ended, no one spoke. You framed me, I said, breaking the silence. And you. I looked at Thomas and Veronica, chose to believe her without question. You destroyed my name, you cost me scholarships, you told people I was in rehab, and you did it all for appearances. Angela finally broke. I'm sorry. Don't, I interrupted. Sorry means nothing when it comes after the damage. Thomas exhaled slowly, like a man who'd been holding his breath for weeks. What do you want? I held up a document. This is a police report. Fraud, defamation, evidence tampering. It's ready to file. But if you want to avoid that, here's what happens instead. I listed the terms one by one. Angela writes and signs a notarized confession detailing everything she did. My college fund is fully restored, with damages for what I lost. A public apology is issued by both of you. Angela resigns from all extracurricular positions. Any attempt to retaliate, silence, or smear me results in the immediate filing of the report. Thomas rubbed his temples. Veronica sobbed quietly. Angela stared at the floor. No one argued. 2 days later, I updated the detective's case file with the full dossier, and my attorney filed the civil claim on my behalf. Not to send Angela to jail, though the charges were serious, but to trigger an investigation. It worked. Detectives subpoenaed bank records, server logs, and communication data. And in the process, they uncovered something my parents hadn't anticipated: irregular payments, shell accounts, and falsified invoices tied to Walker Dynamics' biggest contracts. The fraud investigation shifted from family scandal to corporate crime. Weeks later, after subpoenas turned up irregular invoices and shell payments, investigators secured a search warrant and hit headquarters at dawn. Julian resigned. Credit lines were frozen, and advisors said the firm's valuation cratered. I watched it unfold from a distance. Angela's name was removed from every leadership position at school. Veronica's charity foundation was dissolved. Thomas's face disappeared from magazine covers and business panels. Everything they'd built on lies and image was gone. And I hadn't done more than tell the truth and show my receipts. I had nothing left to prove. They were the ones explaining themselves now, to investors, to prosecutors, to the world. The fallout wasn't over, it was only beginning. And for once, I wasn't the one running from it.